My former in-laws and parents immediately severed ties with me when it became clear that my husband had been unfaithful, cheating on me with my younger sister, the one they all adored. They cast me aside as if I meant nothing. But now, things appear to have taken a turn for the worse. Suddenly, they won't stop calling, insisting they need to see me. Why? Because my sister, the better one who left me devastated, has apparently walked out on my ex-husband for another man. Now they think it's somehow my responsibility to step in and take her place because they believe that's what I, as a woman, am obligated to do. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but everything that's happened recently has pushed me to the edge, and I need advice from this community. Jake, my ex-husband, is a 34-year-old man. We were married for 8 years before everything fell apart. We met during college, dated for 3 years, and had what I believed was a happy, stable marriage. Jake was charming, dependable, and attractive. The kind of man who made people say she's lucky to have him. We shared common goals, and he always supported my career. Everything seemed perfect. I never suspected in a million years how wrong I was. Throughout my life, I was always the responsible one in my family. My parents frequently praised me for being the dependable, mature daughter who would make an ideal wife one day. Lucy, my younger sister, was the opposite, the golden child. She was beautiful, vibrant, and the life of the party. My parents adored her, and it seemed like everyone she met was immediately captivated by her. While I noticed their attention focused on her, I didn't let it bother me too much because she was my sister and I loved her. I figured their treatment of her as the perfect daughter was just part of typical family dynamics. In hindsight, maybe there were warning signs. Lucy was around us often because our families were so close. She and Jake got along well, too well as I would come to realize. One day, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. The house was unusually quiet, but I noticed one of Lucy's bags sitting in the living room. At first, I assumed she'd come over for a visit. However, as I walked down the hallway, I heard voices coming from our bedroom. My heart sank, but I tried to stay calm and not jump to conclusions. When I opened the door, though, I found them together. My entire world collapsed in that instant. I'll never forget the look of shock on their faces when they saw me standing there. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The confrontation itself is a blur in my memory. I was too stunned to fully process it. I left the house that day with whatever belongings I could grab and didn't look back. But as horrible as that moment was, what came next hurt even more. When I turned to my parents for support during the most painful time of my life, I was met with nothing. Instead of comforting me, they gave me a dismissive lecture about how marriages are complicated and suggested that I might have driven Jake away. They even went so far as to say that Lucy was doing him a favor by showing him real love. My own family treated me like the one at fault, as if I had somehow pushed Jake into my sister's arms. The situation deteriorated further in the days that followed. Jake's parents, who I had grown close to over the years, sided with him and Lucy without question. They embraced Lucy as if she were the perfect addition to their family. Every attempt I made to reach out to them was met with rejection, and I eventually realized I was completely on my own. Both families stood firmly behind Jake and Lucy, treating me as though I were disposable, someone easily replaced by a better option. The divorce process was swift and emotionally cold. I couldn't bear to keep any of the possessions tied to my life with Jake, so I left most of it behind. I moved into a small apartment and began rebuilding my life, though I had no support system left. I lost nearly all my friends because Jake and Lucy, with my family's help, spread lies about me. They painted me as a bitter, unstable woman, while Lucy was celebrated as the one who saved Jake. Though it was an incredibly painful process, I was proud of how far I had come. Just as I was beginning to find peace, everything took an unexpected turn. Out of nowhere, my phone started blowing up with calls and messages from my parents and Jake's family. At first, I ignored them, assuming it was some kind of cruel joke or someone trying to ease their guilt. But the calls kept coming, so I finally listened to one of the voicemails. And what I heard left me speechless. Lucy had left Jake. She had met another man and walked out on him without even saying goodbye. Now, with Jake devastated, both families were scrambling to fix the situation. And who did they think should step in to restore things? Me. They claimed it was my rightful place to return as Jake's wife. Their messages were dripping with emotional manipulation disguised as concern. At first, they begged me to forgive them and come back. Then, they began guilt-tripping me, saying it was my duty as a woman to give Jake another chance. My mother went as far as to say this was an opportunity to prove my worth as a daughter after years of them casting me aside. Jake's family joined in, insisting that he was lost without me and that I should return to hold the family together. It was clear that my pain and betrayal didn't matter to them. All they cared about was appearances, expecting me to overlook how they had abandoned me and simply fall back into the role they had chosen for me. After all I've endured, losing my family, my husband, and my social circle, these people now believe they can just summon me back, as if I owe them anything. It's as though they've completely forgotten how they discarded me, replacing me like an outdated piece of furniture. The most infuriating part is their attitude, as if I should feel fortunate to be given the opportunity to return. For a while, I wrestled with whether or not to confront them. Part of me wanted to scream, to make them understand just how deeply they had hurt me and how ridiculous their demands were. But another part of me knew it would be pointless. They've never seen me as a person with feelings, just as someone to fill a role they needed. Confronting them wouldn't change anything. They'd either twist my words to make themselves the victims or accuse me of being overly emotional. I've been ignoring their calls in an effort to maintain some peace in the life I've rebuilt for myself. But their persistence has been relentless. And every few days, another voicemail or text message drags me back into that cycle of anger and pain. They don't view me as an individual with my own life and struggles. To them, I'm just a convenient solution to their problems, someone to patch up their mistakes. It's draining, and I'm exhausted from constantly feeling like I'm the only one who sees how twisted this situation is. I know I'm right to refuse to return, but part of me wonders if I'm overlooking something. Should I confront them and try to make them see the damage they've caused, or should I simply block them all and leave them to deal with the mess they created? I've made significant progress in rebuilding my life, but this entire ordeal has reopened old wounds I thought I'd healed. Reddit. What should I do? Is it worth explaining to them how much pain they've caused, or would it just be a waste of my time? Update 1. Hi, everyone. I wish I could say things have improved, but the situation has only spiraled further out of control since my original post. My inbox is now flooded with even more messages and calls from both my family and Jake's family. It's become overwhelming to the point where I dread looking at my phone. I've tried blocking numbers, but they somehow keep finding ways to contact me, whether through new numbers or emails. It feels like they're determined to wear me down. What shocked me most was receiving a call from Jake himself. I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but this time I did, thinking it might be work-related or a friend. As soon as I heard his voice, my stomach dropped. He launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech, starting with an apology and claiming he now realized the mistakes he'd made. I was stunned by his audacity. He spoke as if forgetting to pick up groceries was equivalent to shattering our marriage by having an affair with my sister. Jake kept talking about how we owed it to each other to work things out because of the years we spent together. Hearing him say that after all he had done felt like a slap in the face. He had the nerve to bring up our 8 years of marriage as if I was somehow obligated to cherish them. He spoke of missing the stability we once had and how he now wanted to settle down, especially with Lucy out of the picture. Throughout his speech, he kept using words like we, our life, and our history, as though he still had any right to speak about us as a unit. I sat there, shocked and furious, barely able to respond. Each word he said only fueled my anger. Eventually, I interrupted and asked, "Why now? Why do you care now that she's gone?" He gave me a pathetic excuse about realizing what he'd lost and said he thought I was strong enough to move past it and take him back. Strong enough? As if putting up with his betrayal had anything to do with strength. After I hung up on him, the messages from my parents became even more relentless. They had the audacity to suggest that Jake's apology proved he was truly sorry, and that I should view it as a sign to give him another chance. My mom even said, "Isn't it enough that he's asking for forgiveness?" Her words made my blood boil. They treated his weak attempt at reconciliation as something I should celebrate, as if I should feel validated or grateful for it. They completely ignored the fact that I was the one who had been betrayed and discarded. I couldn't stop wondering how they could expect me to act like everything was fine. How could a few empty words erase all the damage he had caused? Did they really think I would just run back to him and pretend none of it had happened? Out of sheer frustration, I called Lucy. I didn't even know what I planned to say, but I needed to express how I felt. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail telling her this entire mess was her responsibility, and that she should be the one dealing with it. I was furious and deeply hurt, and I didn't hold back. Of course, Lucy didn't reply, typical of her. She had created this chaos, torn apart two families, and walked away without a care. Now, she was probably off with some new guy, not even sparing a thought for the wreckage she left behind. She had abandoned me to handle the aftermath while she moved on scot-free. Meanwhile, I was fielding endless calls and emails from relatives who somehow still believed I could fix everything. They couldn't seem to grasp that I wasn't some disposable person they could use and toss aside whenever it suited them. Her words felt like a betrayal, as though she was dismissing my pain and heartbreak in favor of maintaining some illusion of family harmony. I was so shaken that I couldn't even respond. I just hung up and cried. I wished I could cut them all out of my life, but it's not that easy. Despite everything, a part of me still craves their acceptance and approval. I know it's unhealthy and they've made it clear who they are, but it still hurts. It feels like a piece of me is still that little girl longing for unconditional love from her parents, even though I now know they'll never give it. That realization is almost as painful as their betrayal. Here I am, feeling lost all over again. I thought I had moved on, rebuilt my life, but they keep pulling me back into their mess. Part of me wants to confront them and tell them exactly what I think of their so-called family values, but another part of me wonders if it's even worth the effort. They've shown me who they are, and deep down I know no amount of explaining will make them see me for who I truly am or respect my boundaries. Still, it's so hard to walk away completely when they keep dragging me back. Right now, I'm mentally and emotionally drained. It feels like they're trying to undo everything I've worked for, every bit of peace I've fought to achieve. I know I shouldn't let them affect me, but it's so hard not to feel like I'm the one in the wrong, even though I know logically that I'm not. I blocked their numbers, emails, and social media accounts. It wasn't an easy choice, but I needed some kind of boundary. Any boundary, because my head was spinning. For a few days, it felt like I'd won a small victory. My phone wasn't constantly lighting up with guilt-tripping messages, and for the first time in months, I could just exist without their constant noise in the background. But of course, that peace didn't last. Nothing about this situation seems to let me breathe for long. A few days later, I came home from work, exhausted and ready to collapse, only to find my mom standing outside my apartment as if it were completely normal. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't seen her and walking away, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. If I didn't face her now, she'd just keep coming back. The whole situation was classic mom, a textbook example of emotional manipulation. She started talking about how the family was falling apart, how Jake was miserable, and how Lucy's absence had left a wound no one knew how to heal. She kept emphasizing how important family is, as though that alone obligated me to fix everything just because we're related. She went on about how I needed to let go of the past because that's what families do. She even mentioned that Christmas was coming up and how it would be the perfect time for everyone to come together and make amends. I couldn't believe her nerve. This was the same woman who stood by while my husband and sister shattered my life. And now she expected me to be the one to repair the damage. My head felt like it was going to explode. It was infuriating, but also incredibly draining. I stood there doing my best to stay composed while she rattled on about forgiveness and moving forward. By the time she left, I felt completely wrung out, like an old dish rag. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Not long after that ambush, I got an email from Jake. I hadn't heard from him in a while, so seeing his name in my inbox felt like a slap in the face. And just when I thought I'd seen it all, Lucy reached out. Her email came out of nowhere, with the subject line reading, "I'm sorry." For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to take responsibility for what she'd done. But of course she wasn't. Her so-called apology was nothing but a pile of justifications. She went on about how she never intended to hurt me and how her relationship with Jake just happened because they were in love, as if that somehow excused everything. There was no use engaging with someone who was so clueless about the destruction they'd caused. It felt as though they were trying to rewrite the narrative, pretending like none of it was a big deal, as though their actions had no real consequences. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into doubting my own reality. The past few weeks have been some of the most challenging I've ever faced. The betrayal, the pressure to forgive, and the constant emotional manipulation have taken a massive toll on me. Therapy has been helpful, but at times, it feels like progress is crawling along at a snail's pace. It's hard to find hope when everything around you keeps dragging you back into the same mess. Still, I'm making an effort. If nothing else, this entire ordeal has forced me to learn how crucial it is to prioritize myself, even when the world is screaming at me to do the opposite. With the holidays approaching, I know things are going to be rough. The constant reminders of family togetherness will be unavoidable, but this time I won't let it dictate my decisions. For far too long, I've been trying to keep the peace and make everyone else happy at the cost of my own well-being. It's time for me to take charge and choose what's best for me, even if that upsets a few people along the way. But then I remember everything that happened, all the ways they hurt me. And I know this is what I have to do. I'm beginning to understand that I don't owe anyone my peace, happiness, or mental stability. I'm learning that it's okay to walk away from people who don't respect my boundaries, no matter who they are. The future still feels uncertain, and I know there will be more challenges ahead, especially with the holidays coming up. But I've made up my mind. I won't let the past hold me back or decide what my future looks like. Finding this community has been like discovering a safe haven I never expected, and it genuinely means so much to me. I truly didn't think things could get worse, but life has a way of proving me wrong. Since my last update, everything has escalated. It feels like everyone involved has decided they won't back down. Instead of giving me the space I need to heal, they've doubled down on their efforts to guilt, manipulate, and pressure me into returning to a situation I've fought so hard to leave behind. The chaos feels endless, and it's a constant struggle to maintain my sense of peace. The first major warning sign came about a week ago when I received a letter from Jake's parents. Initially, I thought it might be an attempt at reconciliation or perhaps an apology for their role in everything. But no, the letter was nothing but accusations. They accused me of being selfish and immature for refusing to forgive Jake and for not trying to rebuild the family. According to them, my refusal to engage was making things worse for everyone else, as though it were my responsibility to clean up a mess they all helped create. They said if I didn't do the right thing and speak to Jake, they would ruin my reputation by exposing me to our mutual friends. It was ridiculous. What exactly did they plan to expose? That I set boundaries? That I refused to forgive a man who cheated on me with my sister? The whole thing was outrageous and only reinforced that I couldn't trust them. I realized I had to do whatever it took to protect myself from these people. Then Jake decided to take things to a whole new level. One day at work, a coworker came up to tell me someone was waiting for me in the lobby. I assumed it was a delivery or maybe a friend dropping by unexpectedly. But no, it was Jake, standing there like some cliched romantic hero holding a bouquet of flowers. My stomach dropped. It was the last thing I needed. Not only was it a blatant violation of the boundaries I had repeatedly set, but he had shown up at my workplace, my safe space, as if that was perfectly fine. He seemed to think that a bouquet of flowers could magically fix everything he had destroyed. The entire situation was humiliating. My coworkers were watching, and I could feel their eyes on me, making an already uncomfortable scene even worse. Jake, of course, seemed completely oblivious. He went on and on about how sorry he was and how much he missed me, as though his feelings were all that mattered. He had the nerve to claim we were meant to be together, ignoring the fact that I was standing there completely broken, a clear sign that we weren't. It felt like he was trying to rewrite the story, casting himself as the heartbroken protagonist instead of the person who caused all this pain. His actions were selfish, and it felt like he was trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for him instead of taking responsibility for what he had done. I was livid. I had to keep my composure. I firmly told him to leave immediately, explaining this wasn't the place for his apology. He ignored me completely, so I turned and headed back to my office, trembling with frustration. Once inside, I locked the door and tried to calm down. Feeling I had no other choice, I called security to have him escorted out. I didn't want to escalate the situation, but it was clear that I needed to protect myself. I filed for a restraining order against Jake. The idea of seeking legal protection against someone I had once loved was devastating, but I knew it was the only way to ensure he stayed out of my life for good. I couldn't sit back and let him keep invading my space and making me feel powerless. I had to take back control. Meanwhile, my family hasn't stopped their attempts to contact me. Even though I've cut all ties with them, they've found other ways to try to reach me. One of my cousins, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a lengthy message about forgiveness and how much everyone missed me. Unsurprisingly, she didn't acknowledge that none of them cared about me when I was in the middle of the betrayal. It's unbelievable to me that people who weren't even involved in what happened feel entitled to tell me how I should heal. They have no understanding of what I've been through. But the most painful part of all this has been my mom. Despite everything, and despite the confrontation where I made it crystal clear I wanted no part in this mess, she's still trying to guilt me into coming back. A few days ago, she left me a voicemail accusing me of tearing the family apart by refusing to forgive Jake and Lucy. She didn't even acknowledge the pain they caused me. All that seemed to matter to her was how my choices were impacting them. It's exhausting. Every time I feel like I've gained some distance from the chaos, someone finds a new way to pull me back in. Yet through all of this, I've come to an important realization. I deserve better. I deserve better than Jake, better than the toxic dynamics in my family, and better than the life they tried to push me into. I've moved into a new apartment that none of them know about. I've taken extra steps to secure my privacy, including changing my phone number and tightening security on all my accounts. It's sad that I've had to go to such extremes, but these measures are necessary for my peace of mind. Progress has been slow, and some days it feels like I'm barely holding it together. But for the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. That's something I've never done before.